Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Horseman, Data Evangelist with DATAVERSITY. Thank you for joining the latest in the monthly webinar series, Data Architecture Strategies with Donna Burbank. Today, Donna will discuss the business benefits of data modeling, sponsored by Irwin by Quest. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. For questions, we will be collecting them by the Q&A panel. And if you'd like to chat with us or chat with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. Just to note, the chat defaults to send to just the panelists, but you may absolutely switch that to network with everyone. To open the chat or the Q&A panels, you'll find the icons for those features in the bottom middle of your screen. As always, we will send a follow-up email within a couple of business days containing the links to the slides and a recording of the session and any additional information requested throughout the webinar. Now, let me turn it over to Danny for a brief word from our sponsor, Irwin by Quest. Danny, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining for what I know is going to be a great session with DATAVERSITY and with Donna. Had the pleasure of working with Donna on and off over many, many years. So as an old data modeler, this is near and dear to my heart. For those of you not familiar with Irwin today or up to date with Irwin today, we about 8 years ago, we chose to build on our data modeling pedigree of 30 odd years and are now offering a full data intelligence solution to the market with a data catalog, augmented data quality, data literacy, looking after your data governance needs, as well as providing a marketplace to create data products and really push that out to your organization in a much more effective way. Hang on here. So I thought, what can I add to Donna's chat? Well, some statistics from our annual State of Data Intelligence report that we do. So it just came out. It just hit the presses. So I definitely encourage people to go out and take a look at it. But just so you know, some interesting pieces out there in terms of how many organizations are really embracing a data intelligence approach to both mitigating the risks and making sure that their data is governed and secure, but also driving value from that data. So 61% of organizations, which is a 36% increase. And the piece that I thought was really, really interesting is that data modeling for 1 in 4 of those organizations are planning to integrate it in a much more effective way with data intelligence. So taking either a non-existent data modeling practice or one that's maybe a little bit more sort of scattered across the organization and bringing that in to really get more value out of their data intelligence and their data for their business. Also, data products. A lot of organizations, 86 or 84% of organizations are now delivering data products, bringing a lot more context around that so that you can make better decisions, have more trust in the data, and really understand, if the data is being used appropriately or not, both for, traditional analytics, but for AI and all sorts of good things. And 86% of those organizations that are delivering data products to their organization are using data modeling in that context. So pretty powerful in terms of the value, and Donna's going to dig into that. But they're seeing value from data modeling, but not just data modeling as a part of a larger data intelligence initiative. One of our big customers, just to sort of see it in reality in terms of real impact, Eon, they weren't using data modeling or data intelligence. They came to us, and over the last couple of years, they've expanded. Last year, it was 24 business units, 600 Irwin users of all sorts across the organization, and really seeing significant benefits, and now are looking at measuring the sort of above the line benefits of how data is driving their business much more strategically. So, one of the things that brings people to Irwin beyond, the software that really understands the job that's in front of it is our approach to doing things. And this is about maximizing the value of your data, whether it's delivering data products, whether it's doing data governance. You can start, anywhere where you are on this scale. But these 7 steps have proven to be very, very powerful in both, as I said before, mitigating the risks that might be associated with your data, and then really getting the most value out of the data. So if something like this interests you, drop us a line, take a look at our ESG report. Lots of good information out there. So with that, Mark, I'm going to pass it back to you and Donna. Thank you so much.
Wonderful timing, Danny. Thank you so much. Um, my name is Mark Hort. Oh my gosh. Cold meds are making my brain loopy here. Let me introduce to you the speaker of this monthly series, Donna Burbank. Donna is a recognized industry expert in information management with over 20 years of experience helping organizations enrich their business opportunities through data and information. She currently is the managing director of Global Data Strategy Limited, where she assists organizations around the globe in driving value from their data. She has worked with dozens of Fortune 500 companies worldwide in the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and speaks regularly at industry conferences. She has co-authored several books on data management and is a regular contributor to industry publications. And with that, let me hand the floor over to Donna. Hello, Donna.
Hello, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to do these. Also a pleasure to be back with Danny for one of these data modeling presentations. And if anyone on this call is new to this DATAVERSITY series, it is a series. You can see the list of topics from earlier in the year. If any of these are of interest to you, DATAVERSITY is really good at keeping all of these on demand. So you can either go to the DATAVERSITY website, or we also have a link to those from our own Global Data Strategy website. And pretty soon we'll be coming out. Stay tuned for the 2025 series. Will be published shortly. So hopefully you can catch us next year with similar topics. But today, topic of the hour is the business benefit of data modeling. I thought, Danny showed some really great figures. Both he and I have been in the industry for, decades now doing this, and have definitely seen the value of data modeling. So why are they so valuable, and why do they continue to be foundational to any effective, data initiative? So part of it is that data models are a great way to get that clear view of the data that drives the business. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but hopefully we'll show you some examples of how that really, really works. And one of the reasons I like them, they're a very visual way. I mean, we tend to think in pictures, a lot of us, and it just kind of gets to the nut of the business value and the business, pain points or design really quickly. And so, as always with these webinars, I want to, we have an hour here together to try to just give some really practical, concrete steps in creating data models, because I do this all the time. I was on a data modeling workshop this morning with a big financial client, and over they're successful. I still do hear some naysayers in the industry, and I basically say you're probably not doing it the right, you're not presenting it the right way if people aren't getting bought in. Because once you present it in that language of the business, generally people are getting it because you're describing their business to them, right? And you're going to have some good engagement. So let's walk through and show some examples of that. And maybe just starting with a little bit of the why. Maybe this cartoon isn't all that funny, but I showed it anyway. It may be funny if you've gone through this, because I know when I first, years ago, would go to the DataVersity webinars and things, or the conferences. And I remember the first one when someone was like, "Oh yeah, we're trying to get a single view of customer and a definition of what a customer is," and everyone laughed. And I kind of was like, I don't understand, how hard is that, right? But if you've actually gone through this, and in fact, the data modeling session we were on this morning was just on that. What is a customer? What is a product? Because the more core it is to your business, the more nuance there is, right? Is a prospect different than a customer? Is a high net worth customer different than a customer? What about a lapsed customer? All those permutations are going to arise the more critical it is to your business. And that's where that nuance comes in. And it can be tempting to just skip that. Do we really have to sit in a room and talk about what a customer is? You'll see that you do generally when you start to implement, but there's that good old phrase, if you don't have time to do it right, do you have the time to do it again? And again, sorry to throw in all these anecdotes, but it's about my 5th call today, and 3 of them today were on data modeling. and one client, they know they're in the beginning of doing an ERP integration, and they were very wise. And they said, before we do the ERP, or as part of this, we need to step back and understand what a customer is. And are there hierarchies with our customers, right? You have a parent company and subsidiaries, right? We've had too many people who didn't do that. And we've actually heard these words, don't bother me, I'm doing an ERP migration, I don't have time to model. And it's like, oh gosh, you'll come back to us later when you have to clean it up. And it's a lot harder then, right? Because ultimately a data model is describing those core foundations of all the applications you're using, all the business processes you're using. So hopefully when you do it right, I don't want to scare people that you're locked in a room for hours always doing this. Sometimes it's a really simple conversation, and I'll go through that because we've solved problems in a data modeling training class, just whiteboarding some concepts, and people are saying, oh my gosh, that's it. That fixes our problem. So hopefully when these and gosh, we've got some people on our team. She may be on the call today. We had one of our best consultants came as an accountant, and she learned data modeling, and she's, gosh, I didn't know this skill, but now that I have it, I can't address any problem I have without starting to whiteboard it out in a data model, because it's just a really clear way to get to the nut of the issues in your business process. So let's go through that. So there are different levels of data models. We'll go through this quickly. Often, if I see a problem with data modeling, it might be showing the wrong level to the wrong person, or using the wrong tool for the wrong job, right? So let's go through them. The enterprise, or your very high level subject area model, I don't always see that used. This can be really helpful in a massive organization where even the subject area of customer has, 20 entities in it or something, right? They can be helpful. I often use them. Definitely from the conceptual down to the physical. We always do in our practice, and generally it doesn't have to take forever. It'll take longer if you don't, right? So the conceptual model, that really is at the business layer, right? And you'll have here the audience, but also the purpose. And I remind myself of this all the time. I kind of have these data modeling mantras in my head. One is at the conceptual level, the purpose is communication, right? So it will be more simple. You will be using business terminology, and I'll show some examples later. You can be kind of creative in how you show that. It could even be in a PowerPoint or, sticky notes or whatever, because you're trying to get the point across. As you get down to the logical level, it's also the audience of the business, but you're starting to get a little more into the business rules, some data structures. It doesn't always have to be a relational database, but you are starting to get some of these business rules. So by definition, you're going to have to be a little more strict with the notation. Down at the physical level, you're actually starting to implement on a physical database. Your constraints and everything are going to be much more important, because you're literally, hopefully, generating a database from this, or reverse engineering a database from it. You'll also see that this is a pyramid, and we'll go through this later. The idea is the conceptual, and I'm going to say these things, and you can fight with me later or send me an email later. I would say, I'm putting this out there, no matter how big your organization is, you should be able to fit your conceptual data model on a page, or a virtual page, because and you could say, but, and I bring, again, these are the same mantras I go through my head when I do a data model. Am I getting too into the weeds too quickly? Your conceptual data model really is, here is a client, here is a prospect, here is a product, and really get into those definitions. And what can be frustrating as a data modeler, the hard part is getting that concise. And there's a famous quote, right? I didn't have, wait a minute, I'm going to mess it up. My quote. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one, right? It's really easy to ramble on, but to make it concise and clear is the hard part. And someone could say, wow, it took you 2 weeks to put 10 boxes on a piece of paper. But once people understand, more likely they're going to say, wow, you really described my problem, right? So don't be afraid of that simplicity. That's the goal. As you get into the logical and physical, you will have more entities and eventually tables. Your physical table may have thousands of tables in it that may relate to 20 business concepts at your conceptual level. So keep this in mind. Keep true to the purpose of each layer, and that really helps make your data models shine. I took out some of the figures of the industry I have, and so I'm glad Danny added them back in. But I do have one figure here. I thought this was interesting. DATAVERSITY and we put together a survey ourselves each year on trends in data management. And this question really got to, are you using models of all types, all enterprise architecture, not just data? Which are the most popular ones you use? And you'll see here two things. One, data modeling comes to the top of everything that people can be using, process models and data lineage and business capability, anything across enterprise architecture. Data is way at the top. No surprise, data is hot to so much of what people are doing nowadays. what I thought was interesting as well, and we do this survey every year, and generally between year to year, either conceptual or logical kind of vibe between 1 and 2, and then physical data models is number 3. I like to see that because I'm a big proponent of starting with the business level data model. That's where you get a lot of the value, obviously bottom up, and eventually you want to use these at a physical data model level. They both have value, and we'll talk about that. But I'm very heartened to see that the ubiquity, if that's the word, of the logical and conceptual data models, which really are those business focused. So let's get into some of that. So especially when you are at the conceptual level or the business level, and again, terminology, conceptual data model, I think is the proper term. I often just call it the business data model, or don't call it anything and just show it to people and give them a, walk through it with them. But, and it's kind of facetious here with can you make this look like PowerPoint? Sorry, I'm actually sharing data modeling cartoons. How nerdy am I? Right? But I often do put a data model into PowerPoint, or keep it simple as, we often say, and I'll get into this, oh, the business won't understand. That one drives me crazy. So for one thing, the business is very broad. Who are we even talking to? It's a wide range of people. There's some very technical people in the business, and we'll talk about that. And if they don't understand, are you communicating in a clear way? And so keeping it simple is a really nice way to, and people see PowerPoints all the time. They see hierarchies in PowerPoints all the time. So the more you put it into the business language and keep it simple, that is the beauty of a data model at the conceptual or business level. And so embrace that. Don't be afraid of that. You're not making it, it's not a bad thing that it looks so simple. It's an excellent thing that it looks so simple. So here's an example of one. I guess I can say that on this call. This is using Irwin, the sponsor of this call. One of the things I like about this display is that you actually have the definitions right there in, either you just show the entity level or you show the definitions. And it's almost like a business glossary on steroids, right? That you can see, you could look right here. Is this the definition of an employee? An employee is a full or part-time worker on the active payroll. Oh, actually, we don't include part-time people as employees. They're interns or something like that, right? You can start to see some subtypes, the relationships between things. And generally, as soon as you show this to the person who this business is theirs, then they will start to engage. They might right away say, well, what do you mean? Obviously, a company employs a customer. We only sell B2B. Our companies are the customers, right? Or et cetera, et cetera. So this is just a simple example of, maybe not the most beautiful, but a conceptual data model. Another way to show it is, and this is fine. This is not talking down to people. This is not over, cartoonifying your data model. It's a great way to tell the story, right? We have a sales rep, a support rep, a customer. Right here, you could look and say a customer is a person, and someone might say, well, no, actually, we only sell B2B, right? Or is that maybe called a contact within a company or something, right? The first time I did this, I remember I kind of put myself out on ledge. It was a really large international insurance company based in Wall Street area, and very, 100-year-old company. What was I thinking? It was a very staid, and I was trying to kind of draw the data model. I literally put pictures. Here's your customer, here's your account rep, et cetera, et cetera. And I presented it, and there was like this long, pregnant pause. And I said, oh dear, they're going to laugh at me out of this room and never hire me again. And it was the opposite. The person said, wow, the customer you had there, I think, I was probably being pretty stereotypical. I had their high net worth customer, some old guy from Connecticut with a suit and gray hair, right? And he goes, actually, that was really interesting. That used to be our high net worth customer. Now it's probably someone in sneakers and a t-shirt from Silicon Valley. And we're just talking about that the other day, of who is our customer? Who is our high net worth customer? Do we market to them in a different way, right? She immediately became engaged in the data model by putting a picture. And I was wrong, but it actually really came to because it was the core of their business, and the definition of what is a customer was core to their whole digital transformation and what they were trying to do as a company. So again, this isn't the fanciest or the best example, but it shows that, I started doing this myself because it was, how do I understand, what is even a product? Is it a thing in a box? Is it a financial product? Is it right? So anyway, this is a different way to approach it, but not a bad one as well when you're at that conceptual level. I wouldn't do this for your physical data model, of course, but it is a different way to kind of present things. And again, a data model should tell a story. And when you're presenting your data model, we'll talk a little bit about this, a little bit of data modeling 101. Data models read like sentences. And we tend to, I heard something on the radio the other day that we are such storytellers in our culture that we can't even sleep without telling stories to ourselves, which is a dream. And I thought that was really clever. Yeah, why do we do that? It's just we relate to pictures and we relate to stories. And a data model has both. So when you think about presenting your business level model, your conceptual, your logical, maybe break it into small diagrams or submodels or whatever to say, what story am I trying to tell? This is how, I don't know, a product hierarchy relates to the sales cycle or something, right? Just describe the story and explain how the data model is a part of that. And I will mostly guarantee you'll get a really great response, because it's probably something that the people are facing day to day and probably have a lot of input on and will start to engage. So on that note, these are some real world quotes from customers in a variety of industries. One of my pet peeves that you always get some Donna rants on these webinars. So is that when we just say the business, gosh, the business could be a NBA basketball star, or it could be a teacher, or it could be a doctor, right? So you really need to understand the who you're talking to, right? And these quotes come from a vast swath of quote business users. One was an early childhood educator, right? And do we think that kindergarten teachers are going to understand a data model? They actually did, and engaged, and we had whiteboard sessions on what is a classroom. Is a virtual classroom the same as a physical classroom? Does it mean the building and the people in the building, or a curriculum around a classroom, right? And this early childhood person said, this is very elegant. You basically just summed up our entire organization in a single page. And they were talking about their conceptual data model, right? So throwing all stereotypes aside, your kindergarten teacher was really involved in your data model. It happened. She was excited, right? So another one, a famous one, I love this one. We were at a utility company, and we were there for a couple of weeks, kind of a mad sprint to build the conceptual data model. And after we presented, they basically said, gosh, well, firstly, actually, it was, how long have you worked here? And then we said, we've just been here for a few weeks. So like, how did you learn so much about our company in 1 or 2 weeks, right? And it was nothing, I mean, I like to think I'm a smart person, but it was really the data modeling methodology. We listened, we asked questions, and we literally just played back their business to them in what is a meter, and what is a meter reader, and how does that relate to a property, right? And we just asked those leading questions. It was the power of data modeling that we were able to describe a company we had never worked in before, in an industry we'd never worked in before, and had that response. No one's ever summed up our company as well as you did, right? This one I liked because this was from a tech perspective. It was the VP of software development. This was for a university we worked with, and we kind of were working for, actually, well, they called them customers, but we never saw the data. We kind of did like a customer journey, right, of where the data was used, and then linked that to the data model. And this VP of software development basically said, I've never seen the data from the customer's perspective, and that really helped me with my software application development. Thank you, because it was that business view that he obviously knew the physical data, but had never seen it from that business perspective. So he really thought that was helpful. That was not just the business people who like business level data models, it's also the tech, right? This one is another kind of Donna rant here, right? I love this data model. That's fine. We hear that all the time. The last architect told me I couldn't possibly understand this stuff. But when presented this way, it makes total sense. It's so logical. And I cringe when we data people think we're so much smarter than everybody else. It is our job to communicate the data model, because when presented this way, it should be logical. You should be describing the business to the person who's doing the business, and then it's a conversation. So please don't, and I don't know why we do this in data. I've probably done it myself, but we just think because it's data, oh, we are so much better than everybody else. And please don't do that. I know a lot of industries do that. When people are coming to us for help, speak in their language, not ours, right? And generally, and I don't necessarily have the full thing in this deck, I will present, again, I literally did it this morning, to some financial services employees who kind of know data and math and things like that. We had 3 slides on what an entity was, what a relationship, how you read the cardinality, what supertypes, subtypes are, and then we had a whole hour conversation on the model. It didn't take that long. They're simple concepts. So we didn't talk down to them. We just gave a few, people know how to read diagrams typically. So also, and you'll see this before, this is a clinical health organization. We did a data model. Now 2 more departments are asking if you could do this for them because they heard how helpful it was. You will find that, again, people say, oh, that can I, they may not even call it a model, but that thing you did that solved the problem, could we get one of those? This one I love too. From marketing, you finally explained why our campaigns aren't working, right? It was the way the campaign data was linked and et cetera, right? That's the type of result you'll get from having a good data model. My absolute favorite one, and it will happen if you're doing it the right way, hand me the pen, right? What I love about data modeling, it is, and we do, well, in the old days, and it's coming back, but we literally get in a room and whiteboard. I've also done it very successfully with virtual whiteboards or even Miro boards or something like that, where people can start to, again, I don't want to belittle the art and rigor of a data model, but some of the simple concepts everyone can learn pretty quickly of what an entity is, what the relationship is. And I've had people literally in a workshop grab the pen out of my hand and say, no, this is the relationship. A customer can have more than one account, and that's what's wrong in the system, and that's what's driving us crazy and why we have to do workarounds, right? And so that's the beauty of it. You'll get people engaged and involved. So some quotes that I love. And on that note, I am a fan of just the good old sticky note session. So again, if you're in the real world, either whiteboard or sticky notes, or I've done this virtually. In fact, we often use the slide and those sticky notes move, right? And or you change the word, right? And we do this in some of our training classes. And if anyone wants to give usually I say this, what kind of company is this, right? And if you want to put that in the chat, what people think, because what I love about a data model, it sums up an org, and I can look at a good conceptual logical data model and probably read the company back to you without even having been in the data model sessions, because that's what a data model does. So full disclosure, now that you've had some time, it's an insurance company, right? You've got agents and policies and claims, right? Some of it's generic, companies, products, and things. But again, I have solved real world problems with something not too much more complicated than this. We worked with a big insurance company up in Canada that was trying to drive everything to be more customer centric and really get that single view of the customer. After a while, it was like a couple-hour workshop, we finally came to the point they couldn't do that with their current data. They knew policies, but they didn't know the customer. They knew that I had a car policy and a house policy, but they didn't know Donna Burbank, hypothetically. So they really had to rework the data and do some overhaul to that. But it really came down to that data model. What is a customer? What is a policy? What is a product? Is that different from a policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and again, you can get to some clear aha moments pretty quickly and iteratively. And one of the things I like about a sticky note or a virtual sticky note or Miro board or something, or an Irwin, right? We have done it with the tool directly, but people can get hands-on pretty quickly. And a sticky, please don't put somewhere out on the LinkedIn that Donna Burbank does conceptual data models only in sticky notes, right? You want to take this and put it in a robust tool, but it demystifies it, and it is a little more collaborative, that people aren't as hesitant to go up and put a sticky note saying no, a product is different from a policy, but they may not want to get hands-on with the data modeling tool. That is something an architect would probably do. So a little bit of data modeling 101, but not, I think a lot of folks in the call probably know data modeling. If not, there's tons of resources out there, either through DATAVERSITY or my books, or Irwin has some good trainings as well. But my point here is that when you do the data model in the right way, it really is starting to create those business rules of the organization, and it reads like a sentence. And I've been full disclosure in other webinars, so I'll say it again now. I don't know if they even still teach it in school, but in our school we had to do diagramming sentences, like in English class. What is a noun, and then there's a verb, and then there's a prepositional phrase that would. And I was probably the only third grader in Massachusetts that actually enjoyed that exercise, which is probably why I'm a data modeler, because it's really the same thing. So if I'm coming to a new organization, I can probably do a really good draft data model with either one or two things. Go to the website, and it says things like, we are a company that sells products in regions worldwide with 1,000 employees. You just take the nouns out, right? It's customer, it's product, it's region, it's employee, or you ask somebody about their business. Well, I'm a company, within the same words they say, you start to write down the nouns. So here you'll see an employee can work for more than one department. A customer can have more than one account. All the nouns are your boxes that'll be in the data model. Why I like these, and I won't wax poetic about each one of these, almost all of these have been a real world business problem that have been solved. Can a customer have more than one account? Can two customers be listed on one account? Can an employee work for more than one department? I'm still traumatized by I work for the company that I did both pre-sales consulting and implementation consulting. When I put in my expense report, sometimes part of it went for pre-sales and part of it went for consulting, and the system wouldn't let me do it. And I had to put in 2 expense reports, and it was a huge workaround because the business rule in the application said an employee can only work for one department, and I worked for 2, right? So there's like a real world that caused me pain in my life because a data model is wrong. And I challenge you, and I've ruined my family and friends, that every customer service interaction you have, you go to the bank and they can't change your address because you can only have one address and you have a home and a a PO box or something. Bet 80% of those are going to be some sort of data problem or likely a data modeling problem. One of my friends came home and said, I had a problem with a bank, and Don, I told him it was a metadata and data modeling problem. I'm like, great, did that help? No, but it made me feel good, right? But hopefully your company, you can start to avoid some of these things, right? And then we kind of got to this, the lines are the verbs, right? These aren't the best verb phrases, but I always say put a verb phrase on the model, because then it starts to read the sentences and it becomes more clear. A department can contain more than one employee. Maybe that's not the best verb phrase. Can it, employ an employee, or can it refer an employee? Might not always be the verb phrase you think. So, and again, that makes it much more readable to someone reading the model. So in here, you'll see an example of, a logical data model, which you're getting a little more detailed. You're starting to put attributes on the model. You're starting to understand, again, these might be fancy words, but they're not when you explain them correctly. A primary key, how do you uniquely identify a customer? And I'm sorry, I keep bringing up the data modeling session I had this morning, but almost all of these things came up. How do you uniquely identify a product? Is it by the product code, by the product name? Do people use different way? Like, these become real world examples, right? Because it isn't always as easy. This isn't the best example because we have easy ones like customer ID. Well, you don't always have a customer ID. So how do you think of master data management? Do we match on the first name and last name, or the date of birth and all of that kind of stuff? Or, are these the right attributes? And when logical data models are also really well understood by the business, because you're describing the stuff people are doing every day. And I would eventually want to get down to the logical level, because you're getting to that more detail. And again, all of these I could probably I won't, because we do have to get off this call, but could tell stories of almost each one of these entities that have caused a problem or a solution with a customer. What is a part? What's the difference between a raw material and a finished good, or a subassembly? And do they relate to each other? And all of this stuff are absolutely critical business decisions. So probably a better example is to actually give some real world examples. I picked these 2 because they actually spoke with us on DATAVERSITY. And as I mentioned, DATAVERSITY does a great job of keeping all of the old recordings, so you can see them linked here. And Mark and Shannon will be sending out the materials in the recording later, so you'll have linked to this. But one of the reasons I like this one, it's a little different, the Environment Agency of England, because their quote business users were scientists. Right. So for me to go to the business and say, oh, you couldn't possibly understand something complicated like a data model. Gosh, these people do scientific discoveries and things like that. So how am I to talk down to them? And the sponsor of this, she was a scientist, and she goes, I've just been reading, and this thing called the data model, I think, is what I need to do. And she spoke very eloquently on this webinar, better than I would, about her process there. And it kind of, to get to the punchline early, so one of the things when they were talking about their master data, it was something like, what is even a living organism? Are the fish in the water the same as the cows in the field, the same as, microbes and things? And they said yes, and they were able to really simplify their scientific discoveries. And yeah, there is some people, and that their job in the world is to count cows, I realized. And that just sounds like kind of a fun job. But that was their master data. Both it was cows and fish and things like that. But it really did save them time and money. And they were doing a lot with open data sets. And to publish those open data sets, you really need to be really clear on your data. Something is, some of the impacts of even getting a fishing license. renewed online actually became some of the foundation. The data model was some of a foundation of that. So it really had some not only academic benefit, but also some real world, on their drive to become a digital organization, to have more open data for the environment. Data models were a key part of that. And I told you I would ruin you once you get into data modeling. This client wrote to me, I think it's okay to share, about a year later over Christmas. She goes, you know what? I am so into data modeling now. Over the holiday, my daughter and I data modeled our kitchen. And we had the cupboard and all the different spices in the cupboard and the different types of food items. And I'm like, okay, I have definitely ruined you. It's like my daughter liked it as well. So again, it's just basic logic, right? And once you learn this way of thinking, it can really help you. It helped her organize her kitchen over Christmas. So there's that. This one I love as well for several reasons. So Kiewit is maybe one of the biggest companies that you don't know. If you've been driving on a highway, or you've been, they do a lot of the big infrastructure projects in America and Canada and a bit worldwide. But what I like about this too, we always use examples of models, architecture. Like, it's just like designing a house, right? And you have kind of the architecture, and then you build. These folks, they knew how to read architecture, but they do it all the time. They're building a combined cycle power plant, I think was the example we kept using. And if they can, do a multi-gazillion dollar power plant and see all of the electrical, from the high level conceptual modeling of what a power plant looks like to all the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty of the electrical wiring of a power plant, who am I to come and say you couldn't possibly understand a data model, right? And they really latched on to data model because that literally was their language, as they spoke in models. And I don't think I included an example, but in the webinar they do. We actually almost started with a logical for them. We did roll up into the conceptual, but for them, more detail was sort of the better, because they were so used to, A, it was a very complicated business, and B, they really wanted to get down into that detailed layer, and then we kind of rolled up. But really a great example that I love, because literally it is architecture. So data architecture for architecture. And Luis, who spoke with me, did a really eloquent way of explaining the benefit they got through data models for, folks swinging hammers, right? So again, from scientists to construction engineers, to anyone across the business, to teachers, right, can truly understand and benefit from a data model. So on that, I said we use this analogy all the time, so here I go. Is that idea of designing versus building. So I think when we're talking about the conceptual and logical model, that's definitely in the kind of that top-down business design. You also want to make sure you're using data models for the build. So that is going to be your example here of a physical data model. You can see in Irwin, and to be fair, other data modeling tools can do this as well, but you can literally take the picture and generate your DDL or your database design scripts, which is super powerful. And it can also go the other way. If you're not using a data modeling tool, and I used to do this in the day with Danny, full disclosure, like one of the best ways to demo and see the value of a data model, you point it to some legacy database that people have forgotten all about and don't know anything about, and you press a button and you get a fully documented physical data model like this. Can be super, super powerful. So I'm talking a lot, partly because it's a business value of that top-down design, but there's also business value in creating that inventory and using that bi-directional, both bottom-up and kind of design then build for your physical, and then doing something like a compare, and really understanding this can be as powerful and can really have business benefit, which I'll get into. So you don't want to show this to the business user. I'll get into this, but these decisions, again, I won't talk all day about all the things I've run into in the world, but almost each one of these, and we'll give some examples of having the wrong data type or data types that don't match, or those actually cause physical problems, whether it's performance or things breaking, etc. This is equally as important to the business, even though when you're talking to the business, you probably don't share the data model. Sometimes I do put it on the logical, kind of a high level data type. I probably wouldn't say varchar 20, but it might be, is this a character field or a text field, or, is an employee ID a numeric or is it alphanumeric? Things like that the business will and should understand. But please avoid the death by data modeling. And I have been part of these, or the result of these, of literally back in the day, and why some people may have a bad taste of their mouth from data modeling. It's literally, we're going to have a room, or the war room, and there's the data enterprise, physical data model, or logical even, all like pasted over 4 walls with thousands of entities. And we're just going to bring the business in and sit in the room for a few days, and let's start with the data type for account code. Oh, shoot me now. Like, I'm a data modeler, and I would hate that. So you're not going to expect the business to do that. So may you need to ask the data type for an account code? Yes, but you can do it in more manageable chunks. Please don't do this to anyone, including me. I would run out of the room and screaming. So, but we tend to do this, and I have, and then probably still am guilty of this. Danny called me out before the call. I was like, "Are you still all passionate about your data?" And I am, and I can see it. You spend so much time on this, and it's like, "Oh, but this is my baby. Can I explain each one of these entities?" And all these mantras I use my head and myself, in my head, that I'm sharing you. Like, nobody cares about your data model. Like, nobody's gonna be as passionate about your baby than you are. But they will when you break it into the right story, right? Somebody cares about a subset of this. And so they will care as long as you explain why you need to know the data type for the account code and tell that story, right? So, and you may have all of this large model at once, and Irwin can do this, other data modeling as well, break them into the smaller chunks. So today we're talking about that relationship between the sales folks and the client, and whether a broker is different than a salesperson, et cetera, et cetera. Then people will be engaged. And then it's your job as an architect to make sure all the lines are right and get it all together in one big, so, and some people will. I don't want to say no. We've had people, I kid you not, you think I make up these stories. I do make up stories, but not these. And it was right after the pandemic, so I'll give them that. It was a big aerospace company, and we wanted to have a data modeling session, like like a workshop, and we had food, and we had people coming on a Friday afternoon. We thought nobody would come because it's a data modeling session on a Friday afternoon. The room was full. And I kid you not, people were engaged. We had the model printed. There's a place for printing a model. People can write on it. They can draw. They can put sticky notes. We had to kick people out. It was 7 o'clock at night on a Friday, and people were still talking about the data model. And that was an enterprise one printed on the wall, because it was really, if they were doing a big digital transformation, and people were super passionate. I who am a passionate data modeler, I was like, can I go home now? Like, we can have another session. But if you are facing the right pain point and present it in the right way, and maybe give people food, but the food wasn't that good to stay till 7 o'clock at night, right? But you will get engagement. But just think of how to present it. So another part on that physical level is this idea of an active inventory of data assets, because you can both, again, reverse engineer and understand all of these. Does anyone know anything about Teradata anymore, or Sybase, right? That's a legacy system that it's important, but no one understands. You can create that inventory, but then you can also make the changes and do that forward engineer, and really make this. It's not just a passive, nothing against the data catalog. They're super valuable as well. They're kind of a sister to this, but that's why I call it like an active data catalog, because you can literally change the data type and then create your DDL, alter scripts and things like that. So it's a nice complement to your metadata management suite of tools, because it's very active. And I sort of am bringing this into Agile in terms of Agile sprints and things like that. But whether you use formal Agile, or I always say we do Agile lowercase a, like just do things in iterative design phases, works really well with data models. So like pick up, yes, eventually you should have an enterprise conceptual or logical model. I do think you do, because you need to describe the business. You may also do that in pieces, still with an enterprise view. If you're going to describe customer, make sure it's an enterprise view, but you might just start with, things around customer, or things around the sales process or something. Create subject areas, do the top down, understand. Also, does that align with the bottom up? You probably will find some discrepancies. Oh, the business says that a customer can have more than one account. When we look at the ERP, they're locking that down, that every customer can only have one account. So what do we do? Right? That was just a fictitious example, but you will find things like that are probably causing you the pain points. And generally with ERP, that's a tempting one. Well, the system already does it. And I will say with anything, 90% will work, but it's that 10% that doesn't work that you're going to be fixing for the next 5 years, right? So up front, we had one client. I was so proud of them. They did do an enterprise data model. Then they looked for a tool, and the vendor said, no, we can we do everything, that's fine. And they said, no, actually, here's our enterprise data model. Could you ensure that your system matches these rules? The vendor was shocked, and they were actually able to get some customizations in the product based on their data model. And they did that before the product, purchase. And they were super wise. Shocked the vendor, but they were ahead of the game. They said, these are the things we need the system to do. A customer can have more than one address. A customer can have more than an account. An employee can be in more than one department. And they validated that upfront before buying the tool. Pretty rare, but it was amazing. It worked really, really well, right? And then rinse and repeat, right? Iterate the model, and then don't forget to publish and communicate. I know I'm guilty of that. I know I've just been rambling on for an hour, but you're communicating, Donna, probably too much. But it's so easy we want to go build the next thing. Don't forget to publish it. Either put it in your data catalog, put it in your data governance website, make sure all the developers see it, all the business people agree to it, then go to the next one and keep getting success. So it's that little bit of the, celebrate your successes, integrate, hopefully fix some things in the business and link that back to your successes, and you will have some good success there. I won't go on a full Donna rant on this, but I just will say that there's different data models for different use cases. The ones I tended to show you are kind of that relational, really bad data modeling joke there on the left, getting into third normal form for you data geeks out there. But a lot of the business rules kind of lead themselves into relational, those, customer can have more than one account, a student can be in more than one discipline, or things like that, right? Now a patient can have more than one, comorbidity or whatever. So, but also I've used conceptual data models at your dimensional layer, because it's a very easy, I've had people say, no, it's only at the physical. And I would argue with that, right? We want to kind of slice sales by region, by product, by campaign. Just at a high level, mapping that out, or your conceptual or even logical level, can be really important. I think as you get into more of the NoSQL and things like that, they tend to be more physical, but at that conceptual layer, people can still be value from those core business rules. And no data modeling technique is better than the others. It's not like relational is better or worse than dimensional. They all have their different use cases. But in any case, having the model can really help you get to some of those core business rules. So a couple more real world examples from real life that we've used successfully for data models. One I already talked to, environmental sampling. This was the Environment Agency of England. That how do we align our scientific terminology? I like some of these examples, and I picked them on purpose because it isn't your typical, and I've done it myself. It's so easy to talk about customer and product because we all understand, we've all been a customer and bought products, even if we don't work for a retail company. But that's just a tiny subset of all the different types of companies who use, or organizations who use data models, right? I mentioned this one also in kind of education or early childhood development. How do we create better outcomes for the children we serve? The core to that was the data model. What are we even tracking to and able to track outcomes? E-commerce, digital transformation. So many people come to us. In fact, I already talked about 3 times. Sorry, it's top of mind with a conversation I had this morning with a company looking to do a digital transformation, ERP migration, etc. And the first question they came to us and said, we know we need a data model first to understand our product hierarchies, our customer relationships, etc. Super wise. University student support, and we've done student journeys. We've linked that to date. What do we even mean by a student? Are they an online student? Are they an in-person student? Are they a graduate student, right? All of these core things around classrooms and curriculum. And I went to university. I didn't realize how complicated all of that is until I did the data model, right? It was super interesting about how all that fits together. Water utility, data modernization. I talked a little bit about that. That's the one where they said, gosh, how many years have you worked here? I can't believe you only been here a week or two. But what I liked about that one is they were doing not only a digital transformation, but sort of AI. And they realized before they wanted to do AI and machine learning, they needed those core business rules and those core artifacts, and they needed a data model to do that. So we often, I've heard this too, aren't data models old-fashioned? Well, it doesn't get much more newfangled than AI. And no matter what you're doing, whether it's something like AI or machine learning or anything of data science, everyone can benefit from those core definitions and business rules that are in a data model. It isn't only kind of your legacy applications and BI. Not that BI is legacy, but you know what I mean. I talked about Kiwit, which is the construction, and they were able, I didn't highlight that as much, but they were actually able to use the data model to kind of highlight some inefficiencies and improve some of their business processes as well in construction. Agile software development, I touched a little bit on that, but sometimes I've heard, you can't, Agile doesn't document, you can't use data modeling with Agile. Why not? I'm doing a user story. What data is involved? Can I create a little mini data model to describe this user story or this user use case? Absolutely. And we've done that as well. We worked with a big customer, what do you call it? Like a membership organization. And their biggest problem was, how do we define a member or a customer, and et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully you can see these are a wide swath of very different kind of organizations. So I will again put myself out in the limb. I bet you whatever kind of, org you're with, you can benefit from a data model. So some of the benefits we've specifically solved with a data model. Again, I talked a lot about the kind of business level, your conceptual and logical, but this was an actual real world unnamed retail company that their website went down and they lost 2 days of online sales because a data engineer, a database administrator decided to change the product code from character 12 to character 10. And you can imagine it didn't do that across all the systems, and the whole website came down and they lost a lot of money doing that. That came down to something as boring and banal as a data type, right? I wonder, this was probably beyond a data model. There's a lot of governance involved in that as well. But that was a physical data modeling thing that could have been solved, right? Why do we have so many duplicate suppliers? This was one. This was one that came back to the business rules in the data model in an ERP system, that can a supplier have more than one address? In this particular tool, a supplier can only have one address. In this was a expanded case because this vendor had a lot of different addresses that, depending on the product they would deliver to it. They had a shipping address, a delivery address, a bill to address. So instead of having a customer with more than one address, nothing wrong with the poor people in billing and finance, etc. They just created a new supplier because they had to get their job done, which launched an entire master data management cleanup and all of this, all down to a simple business rule and a data model. So back to that cartoon in the beginning, what is the customer? And gosh, do we really need to do this? You kind of do. Something as boring as, can a customer or supplier have more than one address, can cause you a whole lot of headache down the road. Just get it right up front, right? Who decided to send, typo there, renewal reminders to people who don't own our software? Work for a company who did this. Someone said, can we just send out renewal? Just send it to all our customers. Don't bother, checking their renewal data, whatever. Just let's get it out there. And what is a customer? Someone saw a database with the title customer, and it was actually prospects of people, sales. You're not going to correct sales saying I'm going to talk to a customer, and like, no, it's a prospect. But it made a big deal when they basically sent out time to renew the people who didn't even own the product. So they looked silly. And that was just back to what is a customer. My favorite one, I think I gave them a little extra superhero points. I'm seeing this more and more, but companies using your conceptual data model to really align with your data strategy and roadmap, right? So your high-level data model is going to have hopefully the scope of all of your main data areas: customers, products, locations, patients, providers, et cetera, et cetera. And I've had several customers kind of use that, almost color it in, saying, well, Q1, we're really going to focus on patient data. And then next year, next quarter, we're going to work on something else. And it's a good way to kind of, that's their roadmap for the scope of data. And I thought that's worked out really well. And they often, especially folks who are back in the office, kind of even print it out and put it out there as almost like their marketing thing. This is our scope of work. These are the types of things we help you with. So I hope that was helpful or interesting. I think just to summarize, when you're at the business level, please speak the language of the business, and you will get to some really good results. You also need that solid physical implementation, and when you do that, you will increase efficiency. You will avoid building it again. And no matter what industry you're in or organization, we've worked with nonprofits and governments, et cetera, you will solve real world problems, or even better, if you design up front, you won't have them happen to begin with. So hopefully that was helpful. Full sales pitch here. We do this for a living. So if you want some help, come to us at Global Data Strategy. And with that, I will pass it back to Mark to open it up to questions.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions, and thanks to chat for putting in some excellent questions in the Q&A and just being so energized throughout the entire event. So thank you for all the chat in the chat window. So first off, if I am shoving data into a MongoDB or Neo4j graph database or Amazon Web Services database like Dynamo or whatever else, do I create a logical and or physical data model?
I think definitely the logical data model or even conceptual, right? Because I had a slide for that I took out. That at some point you need to sort of, before you start doing a graph, are the nodes of the graph correct, right? So create like a master data model, or even, you know, your core entities of what a customer is, what a product is, and it will help you kind of normalize and rationalize that. With a graph, to me, it's almost like the graph is the model. So I don't know if you map that out, but I think it's kind of a precursor to do, you know, some of, you know, sometimes there's that creating the model with the core business rules to create those core data products or data sets. And then from there, you can turn that into a graph or do, you know, some data science exploration. So I think it's a definitely at the logical level. I would even throw conceptual in there. Before we do a graph of customers and their relationships. And we did this for a big, what do you call it, telecom company, of what is even a customer before we start to create a graph relationship between them. Could help. So Danny, do you have any thoughts, or do you feel differently on that one?
I don't feel differently. I think you hit it spot on. You know, there's a lot of physical support in the data modeling tool now for NoSQL databases, especially document databases, but graph databases are coming. So, you know, if you're working in that environment, you know, there's a benefit. But one of the things that is really powerful is that reverse engineering that you talked about, where you can reverse engineer what you have in that environment into a NoSQL form, and then leverage the tool to do design transformations to actually reverse engineer the beginnings of your logical model, that you can then go out and present and start to work with to see how those things aligned, and then keep those two different paradigms in sync through the use of the tools. So, you know, there are benefits to having a physical model in those environments, but it really depends on how you're working with that. But if you're looking to build that logical model, there's definitely a benefit there from the ability to reverse engineer that physical environment.
Awesome. And we have a related question here. Are these models just useful for traditional relational databases, or do you model for big data stores as well? So very much related, but I think a bit of a different angle.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially with the business value, absolutely start with the conceptual and logical, because that's getting to the core of the information. Big data is kind of a loaded word. Like if you're doing sensor data and thing, you know, probably not. I think the data model helps you add logic and understanding to big data, right? So you're not necessarily gonna quote reverse engineer. Well, big data is a complicated word, right? Maybe your sensor data is a good example of a big kind of data stream, but I would say definitely it helps you make sense of those big data stores. So I would say, you know, start that conceptual or logical. Danny?
Yeah, no, I agree. But I guess what I would bring to this is that you know, that it's again that connectivity between the two different paradigms. The customers that I've seen be most successful, even if they're running a lot of sort of more what I would call non-traditional or non-relational databases, that logical model in a relational format is generally the most powerful, because it's the one that makes it easiest to have those sentences, the quite, you know, to really engage with the business people, because quite frankly, they really don't care how it's physically structured and stored and delivered. They care about how it relates to the business, as Donna, you know, outlined really well. So, you know, it's about using the right model for the right job, and you know, and then being able to keep those things in sync, and leverage the technology to do that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Hmm. The next question here. How do business requirements fit into a conceptual data model?
I think they're great to getting to the core of business requirements. They're getting to your core definitions, and I know it sounds so silly until you do it. Like, gosh, we have 3 customers right now defining what a product is across very different industries and the hierarchies and things like that. It's also some of the, and this, not to get too academic, but there's a subset of business rules in a data model, like those kind of one-to-many. A customer can have more than an account, a student can be in more than one discipline, and things like that. That it's a subset of your total business rules, but those are generally core to a lot of your business requirements. So for those core data-centric business requirements, your logical model is a great input, and it's visual too, so it helps people understand. Danny, your thoughts on
No, I'm going to give you the what she said.
that? Nice.
That's sort of like giving Donna the last word of the webinar, I
Absolutely. Well,
suppose.
Have time. All right.
any success I've had is hanging around with smart people like Donna. So
There you go. Well, that's all we have time for today. So thanks again, everybody, for the wonderful questions. We didn't get to all the questions, so sorry about that. But have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you very much to Danny and Donna for this wonderful presentation. And we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
okay, thank you.